Hey folks, this is just a quick follow-up video to the £50 gaming PC challenge that I recently posted up. Now, although the PC worked really well, there were a lot of concessions that had to be made. This is generally the case when building a system around a proprietary workstation. Now, while workstations have gotten better over the last 5 years or so, many suppliers, HP, Dell, etc., they still intentionally design in nuances into their systems to try and keep people from going elsewhere for parts or upgrades, or in this instance here, repurposing it as a gaming system. So with that in mind, here's a few things that you want to consider when using a pre-built system as a basis for your gaming rig. First up is the internal layout. Now this might seem a bit like a strange one, but in a lot of pre-built systems they come with proprietary hardware, and this means that the internal layout of the case can often be different than what you would get if you built something yourself in like an ATX case. For example, on the £50 PC, it was the right hand side panel that came off to expose the internals. This means that you had a mirrored layout inside, and it means that should you want to upgrade in the future, you're either going to be limited to using that manufacturer's motherboards or ditch everything and start from scratch. The cases themselves also, while having all the features that you might want, often are slightly different. You want a new fan? I'm sorry, only L-mount fans fit in this case. How about a new PSU? Sorry, again, you're going to need a proprietary fitting PSU, meaning it's back to HP or Dell for a new one at a much inflated price. Speaking of PSUs, that leads us on to point number 2. Now, while the PSU I got, it offered ample power for the components that I was using, in these systems they're always going to be from the lowest bidder, meaning that the longevity is questionable at best. The drawbacks don't end there either. These PSUs often don't really feature much in the way of additional connectors, meaning that you probably have to do what I did and use a double SATA or double Molex PCIe 6 connector to get that GPU fed with power. But say for example you managed to overcome these 2 points and somehow fit a real PSU in the case. Is it all good? Well, possibly no. Point 3 is the motherboard. The Q6600 is a pretty good overclocker. I mean, it can easily be taken from 2.4 GHz up past 3 GHz. That's a 25% hike in processor power. It sounds tempting? Well, tough luck. Proprietary motherboards are generally strangled by a really basic BIOS and are pretty much always locked out of functionality. On top of that, you've probably got to be limited to approved and generally weird heatsinks. You can see in this case the heatsink is in the middle of the motherboard. Now this has got a knock-on effect. For example, this case, it's a mirrored layout, so the GPU had its fan facing upwards, but since it was a double slot cooler, which is generally fine these days in any ATX case, it clashed with the CPU mounting brackets. Now this meant that I needed to use a very much not safe for PCMR PCIe expansion cable to move the GPU to a more suitable area and secure it with cable ties. So at this point I'm sure that this £50 PC sounds like quite possibly the worst idea ever, but that's not the whole story. These points were specific to my build. With a bit more time I'm sure I could have held out for a tower with a more normal layout inside, and that would have mitigated a lot of the problems. And while some of the gripes like the motherboard BIOS being locked and non-standard power connectors are pretty common in these pre-built workstations, the mirrored layout and clashes are less so, and something you can probably mitigate for. Likewise, my GPU issue was something that was really entirely avoidable. Like I mentioned in my challenge video, I lost out on so much other cards when I was bidding, and they were single slot and low profile, which is perfect for this kind of rig. Even current gen GPUs like the RX 460 or the 1050 would have fit in this case no problem if you bought the mini versions. So if this video is highlighting anything to you, it's just do your homework. Simply bidding on that keenly priced workstation on eBay, it might seem like a great idea, but if it's your first build, you really want to arm yourself to the teeth with info on what you're buying, its limitations, and that will help you mitigate any problems that you might face. Secondly, have patience. My build has obvious compromises, since I set a hard limit in terms of timescale and cost. With enough patience and preparation, you could have an easy ride when building a computer like this. Getting into PC building, it's not hard, and it's certainly not as daunting a task as it was like 10-15 years ago, and the more control you can have over your component choice, the better. Still, and despite the pitfalls of buying an old pre-built like I've shown here, if you're on a really tight budget or you're just simply curious about PC gaming, an old workstation can provide you with a solid base to get you going. Well, that's about it for me today folks. Thanks for tuning in to see some of the pitfalls that you might want to consider when using a pre-built system. You can use those thumbs and maybe leave a comment telling me about your pitfalls that you found, and consider hitting that subscribe button if you've not done so already. And I'll see you again in the next video.